Hello and welcome to my channel. Happy Halloween. Um, this is the video I'm uploading on Halloween. I hope. So yeah, now we're here. So, for this past month, I have been reading Junji Ito for this past month, and which if you don't know who Junji Ito is, he's considered one of the best horror, manga authors of all time in the anime and manga community. Um, He's written stories like Gyo, um, Uzumaki, No Longer Human. He's written all those. Um, I would say I really enjoyed all of his works that I've read personally so far. I would say none of them were bad. I've read I think it was like 6 or 7 this month, and then like one short story collection. Um, Let me say this though. It was like Junji Ito's horror is not your typical horror. Like you read it and immediately after you're like, ooh, I was scared. Ooh, I'm creeped out. It's more like an eerie horror or grotesque horror that just stays with you. Like you go back to thinking about those. You're like, man, I remember that series in Gyo, or I remember that part in Uzumaki, and it just sticks with you. It's not something where you're just like losing sleep over. It's just something that will stay on your mind for a while and just stay there and like have like be in your memory, and just every time you go back you just feel uncomfortable. Like you don't really like, it's not something where like, ooh, that was scary. It's more something like, I feel uneasy when reading this, or like I feel uncomfortable while reading this. Like sometimes you see images of like things and you're just like, that doesn't look good. That's essentially Ito's mangas in like a short term. It's just this eerie, uneasy feeling that he makes you feel when he's writing. It is something I rarely see done in horror movies or any horror media in general. Because horror movies now are just more like gory action movies, is how I see them now. Like that was just a really bad gory action movie, or anything else. It's not really scary. It is scary, but it's not really like, it's not gonna leave you like feeling uneasy. Like it just, like you may just look at the like a jump scare and jump, or like look at a gory scene and be like, "Oh, that's gross." It's not gonna like stay with you and make you truly feel scared, like Junji Ito's will. I personally really enjoyed all of Junji Ito's work. There was a couple that I felt were lackluster. Like there was one called Secret Classroom. That was the very first one I read, and I personally thought that one was the worst out of all the ones I read. But even after reading that, it still stuck with me. It still made me think about it. Like I read most of these late at night, like when I was about to go to bed, and none of them, like some of them kept me up thinking about them. Like they're all in all just good stories. Like they're not gonna keep you up being scared. They're gonna keep you up thinking about it, like trying to figure out it, because they're very cryptic and artsy stories. They're not really blatant and like in your face, something like One Piece or Code Geass is. It doesn't have the story like directly in your face, like telling you what to think and everything. Like they all kind of have hidden meanings behind them and just make you feel uncomfortable. Like some of my favorite stories that I read personally were, I really liked Uzumaki. I thought that one was good. I really liked Remy. I think that's how you pronounce it. And I also really enjoyed. It actually wasn't a story. I think it was a short story at the end of Uzumaki or Gyo. I'm not sure, but it was like this one of like this person, like these holes that were shaped like persons, and then these people went and looked and they saw their exact figures in them, and like it was the temptation of like going in the hole that fits exactly you, and people who went in the hole never came back. It was just a really interesting story in my opinion, and I really enjoyed it, but it was a short story at the end. I really enjoyed all the short stories at the end of the volumes. They're like a nice little treat he makes. I recently I just finished reading Rimu, so that one's the most fresh in my mind. I wanted to read more for this video, but I didn't have the time, or I didn't get to it, and I'm glad I still read what I read, because they were all enjoyable. Like, there was none where I was like, this was boring, I don't want to read this. Like, they all had me hooked till the end. Like, I don't think there was a single story where I took a pause, where, like, I stopped at, like, halfway through the chapter and went away. No, I finished every story in one sitting, because that's how captivating and good they are, in my opinion. Like, when people say horror, they think, like, they're gonna be shaking in their boots after reading this. You're not going to be doing that exactly. You're just going to be thinking about it constantly after you read it. Like, you're going to constantly be thinking back, like, wow, that part in Gil really, really was fucked up. Like, that part was like, ugh. Which, personally, Gil was one of my least favorite stories that I read. Because I just thought I thought the whole concept behind it and everything, it just didn't really feel right. And, like, not feeling right, like, I felt uneasy or anything, but not feeling right in terms of, like, this story is just not very good in my opinion. Like, it was fine, it wasn't, like, great, but, like, I read Uzumaki, and that one was fantastic. It's just hit or take, like, your personal preference. Like, I've met people that say Gil is their favorite, I've met people that say Uzumaki's the best. I decided to read these for Halloween, and I've always heard good things about Junji Ito. I've never read a Junji Ito work past this month before. And I gotta say, I'm not disappointed. I will keep reading Junji Ito's works in the future. I will constantly keep going back to them. I may even reread some, because that's how good some of them are, in my opinion. I really like the deeper meaning in some of them, and I really like the artsiness of it, and it's all just really good in my opinion. And one thing I do like about some of Junji Ito's volumes is, like, even if you don't have all the time in the world, he makes short story collections that, like, really work with time. Like, they take, like, 5 minutes to read, like, each short story, and they're really short, and you can just pick them up, read it, while a typical volume like Uzumaki usually takes about an hour. And when I say short stories, you're probably thinking, oh, they probably dip down in quality. No, they are just as good. They are fantastic. They are absolutely amazing, and I loved each and every one of the short stories. Well, not each and every one. Like, I think my favorite story, if I had to pick one, and they're all great, would probably be the one where, like, these people were making a movie, and this guy, like, saw in a magazine, like, this model that looked very distorted and monstrous, and she signed up to join their movie film, and they accepted her, and it was just a really great story in my opinion. If I had to pick one of my favorites, it would be that or Uzumaki. I enjoyed both of those really well. And the other one I mentioned with the model was only like 15 or 30, it was like 30 chapters or 30 pages in one chapter. So it's a pretty short read that you can just pick up. I don't know which book it was in exactly, but it was in one of his short story ones, and I really enjoyed that one. And Junji Ito's art is phenomenal. It's really dark and grotesque, and really makes you feel in the atmosphere of the universe that they're trying to portray, of, like, this horror dark tone. Like, his art works really well with that, compared to, like, if he had, like, an art style like My Hero Academia or One Piece, it would not at all. His characters look very real and gritty, and his scenery, some of his art's just amazing. Like, some panels I would look and be like, I would stare at it for a bit because it was just so good. I think where his art shines most is in the story Remy. That's where I saw most of his art, and I was really, like, stunned and blown away by some of the art he had. Uzumaki also has some really good art. Another story I read from Junji Ito, which is not horror at all. Even if you don't like horror, you can read this, I guess, and, like, still appreciate his art. It was the one about, like, his cat or something, and it was a nice, fun little story I was surprised Junji Ito would write. But besides that, I recommend reading Junji Ito's work. If you're a horror fan, I highly recommend. All of his stories are great so far. There has yet to been one, and each story's, like, set in their own universe. Like, none of them connect. Like, there's not really, like, a Junji Ito universe. Like, it's all really good, and every story is contained in their own self-little universe that he creates and fully fleshes out. Now, they're not the best in terms of, like, world building and things, but they're really good horror stories, and I highly recommend reading them this Halloween day, if you have the time. Yeah, but that's about it for my video. This was a bit more serious and more down the tone than my usual videos. I have a Twitter now. It will be in the link in the descriptions if you want to follow. Like and subscribe if you want. I really enjoyed making this video. It was fun. But yeah, that's about it. See ya.